My name is Elara Dorne, and the moment I stepped into the ballroom of the West Crest Hotel, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't the missing name tag, or the way the staff hesitated before showing me to table 19 tucked beside the emergency exit. It wasn't the absence of my photo from the looping slideshow on the wall. No baby pictures, no graduation cap, no award ceremonies. It was the silence. That sharp, familiar silence that settles over a room when someone walks in who doesn't belong anymore. No one turned around. Not even my mother, standing just beneath the chandelier in a deep green dress she probably wore to Finn's latest fundraiser. Not even my father laughing into his whiskey with 3 men who once told me I had leadership potential. Not even my younger brother, the star of the evening, now introduced as managing director of Belwick and Cress, class of '03's proudest export. I stood at the edge of the celebration heels, pinching spine-straight hands, calm. If anyone had asked, I could have told them I wasn't here to be seen, but that wouldn't have been true. Not really, because there's a difference between being forgotten and being erased. And tonight of all nights, I needed to know which one they'd chosen. I took my seat at the table without a word. No one looked, but I was watching everyone, and I wasn't leaving until I found out the truth. The tablecloth was wrinkled. One of the water glasses had lipstick on the rim. There wasn't even a centerpiece, just an off-center salt shaker and a folded card with my name printed in plain black ink, Dr. Elara Dorne. No rank, no division, no +1. Like someone had gone out of their way to be precise in their dismissal. I sat down slowly, tucking the clutch under my chair, adjusting my posture to match the quiet authority that uniformed me for 20 years. Though tonight, I wore nothing but silence. Across the room, the screen rotated through polished lives, surgeons in Seattle, startup founders in Austin, an actor someone vaguely remembered from a national soda commercial. The applause came easy, even for the names no one had uttered in 2 decades. A curated celebration of memory. Except some memories had been edited. When my brother's face appeared, Finn Dorne blue suit arms crossed the company logo, gleaming like a badge. My mother clapped first. My father followed, already mid-toast glass raised high. They beamed like they'd built him themselves from gold and good breeding. Not once did they look in my direction. Not once did the MC mention my name. It wasn't a mistake. I'd told myself that at other reunions, at other holidays, when my name was missing from family newsletters, when my promotion went unnoticed in the alumni column. But this silence wasn't forgetfulness. It was intention. I looked down at the table card again. Just my name, no lieutenant general, no operations director, no acknowledgement that I'd ever done anything after high school except disappear. A woman brushed past me, carrying a tray of flutes. She didn't pause. She didn't even glance my way. I took a drink anyway, fingers steady, because if no one was going to acknowledge me, they also weren't going to see me flinch. From the far side of the room, someone caught my eye. Mara Stillwell. We weren't friends exactly, but she used to borrow my lab notes in AP Chem. She hesitated, glanced at the crowd around my brother, then walked toward me with something clenched in her hand. I didn't speak. Neither did she at first. She simply slid her phone across the table. "I thought you should see this," she said quietly. And just like that, I stopped pretending it was all a coincidence. I stared at the phone. The screen glowed with an email header, 16 years old. The sender was my father. The subject line, recognition removal request. I felt my pulse shift before I even opened it. Given Elara's decision to forego a traditional academic path, it read, and her choice to pursue a non-civilian career, we feel her inclusion in the school's upcoming honor roll materials would misrepresent our family's values. Kindly remove her name from all future communications. The wording was careful, polite, polished, like a scalpel. My throat went dry. Non-civilian career, that was how they framed it. Not military intelligence, not counter-surveillance, not 12 years of command rotations and security clearances so high they didn't have names-only codes. Just a non-civilian career unworthy of mention. I looked up. Mara had gone pale, her fingers fidgeting with the napkin. "There's another," she murmured. She swiped to the next message. My mother this time sent to a Medal of Honor committee. It said I had requested to be withdrawn from nomination to maintain personal privacy. I blinked hard. I'd never even known I'd been nominated. My hands curled around the base of the champagne glass. I was 23 when I led my first joint op across the Eastern Corridor. 27 when I defused a satellite breach in the Baltic without backup. 34 when I briefed the president in a room with no windows and no cell signals. I never asked for public acknowledgement. But I had never rejected it either. They had. They'd built a story where I didn't exist and handed it out to anyone who asked. I thought back to the day I got my acceptance letter from Fort Renard. I'd been 17, shaking, grinning, holding the envelope like it was a second spine. My father didn't even look up from his desk, just said, "So, boots over books," I'd said, "purpose over performance." He didn't reply. He just walked out. That was the last time they treated me like I had a voice. And tonight, that silence finally had a timestamp, a digital signature of betrayal. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me systematically, quietly, and with full intent. Dinner was served. A filet mignon I didn't touch, and a pile of roasted carrots that tasted like nothing. I sipped water instead, each swallow washing down memories that had suddenly grown teeth. The MC stood again, microphone in hand, voice bouncing off the chandeliers, like he thought this was a comedy club instead of a reunion. "Let's give it up for the class of 2003, he bellowed. "Doctors, CEOs, dreamers, doers, and hey, any generals in the room." Laughter scattered around the room like broken glass. My father didn't even wait half a beat. He leaned back in his chair, voice clear enough to carry. "If my daughter's a general," he said, "then I'm Miss America." The table around him erupted. Someone choked on a cocktail olive. Another slapped the table, howling. Even the MC chuckled awkwardly, unsure if he'd stepped into something or lit it on purpose. My mother added smooth as silk. She always had a flair for dramatics, probably still sorting files at some remote base. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just sat at my stained table, hands folded the fork, untouched. Not one person spoke up. Not one classmate who once begged me for tutoring, who rode in my car on cold mornings to debate, meets who told me in senior yearbook margins that I'd change the world. None of them said a word. The laughter went on too long. I watched it all with clinical stillness, the kind I'd been trained to maintain under duress. My breathing was even, my posture unbroken. But inside, something twisted, not into anger, not yet, but something colder, sharper. They didn't know what they were laughing at. Not really. To them, I was still the girl who'd vanished. A cautionary tale, a family disgrace wrapped in pressed slacks, and a name they refused to say aloud. But the thing about stories is once you delete someone, they stop playing by your version of the script. And I was done being edited. I left the ballroom without making a sound. The elevators were slow, too quiet, the mirrored walls reflecting a version of me I barely recognized, still composed, but with eyes that no longer asked for space. When the doors opened to the 20th floor, I walked to the suite registered under an alias only 2 people at the Pentagon knew. The Do Not Disturb sign had been flipped before I ever arrived. Inside, the air was cold, clean. I locked the door, peeled off the shoes that had blistered my heels, and crossed the room to the closet. Behind a false panel in the back wall, beneath layers of linen hangers and decoy luggage, was the case. Biometric lock. My thumbprint retinal scan voice code. 3 beeps. 1 solid click. The lid lifted open like a promise I hadn't spoken in years. Inside was the interface secure tablet, encrypted drive, folded uniform, and the steel badge engraved with a rank no one at that banquet could ever imagine tied to my name. The screen lit up without hesitation. Merlin escalation, Neek. Status 3, threat triangulation. Active, confirm presence. Primary response required. I stared at it for a moment, letting the weight of it settle in. Merlin wasn't just another military drill or overseas tension report. It was the protocol that no one used unless multiple sectors confirmed credible convergence, cyber, naval, biological. My name flashed on the bottom of the screen. Dorne E, clearance Alpha Black. I pressed my palm to the confirmation pad. The system accepted immediately. A voice crackled to life through the line, masked and low. Lieutenant General Dorne. Confirmation received. Extraction has been authorized. Immediate presence requested in D.C. My voice didn't waver. Confirmed. I closed the case again slowly, like sealing away a version of myself I'd have to wear again in a few hours. Back in the ballroom, they were still laughing at the punchline. But the real story was already moving without them. And they were about to find out just how far off script I had gone. Back downstairs, the reunion carried on like nothing had splintered. Music swelled some overplayed anthem from the early 2000s, and champagne flowed with the kind of ease only nostalgia could buy. The MC lifted his glass again, cheeks flushed with laughter. "Let's raise a toast," he called to the Dorne family, our shining example of legacy done right. "Finn, your parents must be so proud." My mother stood first, smile stretched too wide. My father joined arm slung casually around her waist, lifting his glass with that familiar smirk he wore like a badge. Finn nodded humbly, like he hadn't spent the last hour basking in applause. And of course, the MC added, twisting the knife with a grin, wherever Elara ended up. Let's hope she found her purpose. Laughter again. But this time it didn't last. The floor rumbled. It began subtle, just a tremor beneath the soles of polished shoes. Then the windows behind the main tables lit up with a sudden white blaze. A low, thunderous sound swallowed the room. Someone dropped their drink. Then the ballroom doors blew open with a blast of cold air, sending napkins flying and centerpieces toppling. Two figures strode in uniforms, crisp boots heavy against marble. They didn't scan the room. They knew exactly where to go. Colonel Navarro led. His voice cut clean through the stunned silence. Lieutenant General Elara Dorne. "Ma'am." He stopped 3 feet in front of me and saluted sharply publicly, without hesitation. "The Pentagon has requested your immediate presence. Merlin protocol has escalated. File transfer secured. Extraction authorized." You could feel the breath exit the room all at once. The MC's mic slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. My mother's glass tilted in her grip. My father stood still as marble. Finn blinked like the earth had tilted beneath him. Phones were out, recording, whispering, staring. I rose slowly, and for the first time that night, every eye in the room followed me. Not because they wanted to, but because they finally understood I hadn't disappeared. I had outgrown their vision. I turned to face them, my parents frozen just beyond the chandelier's sway. The color had drained from my mother's face, her lips parted but speechless. My father looked at me like he didn't recognize the outline of his own creation. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. "You didn't just forget me," I said, voice steady. "You deleted me." The words landed sharper than any raised tone could have. My mother flinched, barely perceptible, but enough. My father stepped forward half an inch, searching for something rehearsed, an excuse, a redirection. I didn't give him time. "You rewrote the story of this family," I continued, eyes locked on his. "And in your version, I was inconvenient, uncomfortable, better off left out." Gasps rippled around us. A few heads turned. A reporter near the back, still holding up her phone, spoke above the crowd. "We have confirmation," she said. "An email from 2010. Signed by both of you, requesting Elara Dorne be removed from the school's distinguished alumni list due to incompatibility with family values." Silence collapsed like a wave. Chairs shifted. Whispers hissed like static. I stepped closer to them just once. Close enough that only they could hear the final line. "You built a house out of omission," I said. "But you forgot I learned how to burn quietly." Colonel Navarro cleared his throat beside me. "Choppers waiting, General." I nodded. I didn't look back. Not when I passed the MC still gaping beside his fallen mic. Not when Finn reached out like he wanted to say something, but didn't have the language for the gap between us. Not when my mother blinked twice and dropped her glass, shattering it across the floor like it might cut through the shame she'd tried so long to ignore. I walked through the center of their constructed legacy, one measured step at a time, and for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't the one carrying their silence. They were carrying mine. The morning sun broke clean across the flag. Rows of chairs lined the lawn behind the Defense Intelligence Center, filled with pressed uniforms, dignitaries, and a silence that held its own kind of reverence. There were no string quartets, no balloon arches, just the quiet rustle of metals, the crisp shuffle of decorated boots, and the waiting. I stood alone at the front dress blues, immaculate silver stars glinting at my collar. My name, Lieutenant General Elara Dorne, echoed once through the speakers. Not for applause, just for record. The president approached, flanked by a single aide, and read from the citation with unhurried gravity. For sustained excellence in national security operations. For integrity maintained under systems designed to erase. For service without expectation of recognition. We honor you. He stepped forward and placed the Medal of Honor around my neck. It was heavier than I'd imagined. Not for the medal, but for what it replaced the years of absence at family tables, the unopened letters, the birthdays missed, while I decoded threat matrices half a world away. The ceremony was brief. It didn't need to be long. It needed to be real. Somewhere in the third row they sat. My parents. Not as honored guests, not mentioned in the program. Just two aging silhouettes with perfect posture and nowhere to hide. They didn't smile. They didn't clap. And I didn't look at them long. This moment wasn't for them. It was for every cadet who'd been told they weren't enough. For every soldier whose name was skipped on the list because it didn't match the narrative. And when it ended and the brass band played quietly in the distance, I walked the path behind the stage toward the memorial wall where names were carved without rank or decoration. Just truth. Mine was the newest engraving. E. Dorne. Led with quiet strength. Served without needing to be seen. I stood still, until a voice young and shaking broke through behind me. "Ma'am," she whispered, "you're the reason I enlisted." I didn't turn fully, just nodded. That was enough. I used to believe silence was strength, that if I kept my head down, stayed composed, achieved enough, served long enough someone would see me, that my worth would become undeniable if I just kept showing up quietly, competently, without complaint. But silence, when chosen for you, when shaped by others to shrink you, isn't strength. It's erasure. And that kind of silence doesn't protect. It erodes. For years, I convinced myself it didn't matter. That the absence of my name in family Christmas cards, the skipped introductions at weddings, the lack of questions about my life or work, that all of it was just forgetfulness, not design. But design has fingerprints. And the night of the reunion, I saw every one of them. In the emails, in the missing slideshow, in the way my name was never meant to be spoken. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd rewritten me. What shocked me more wasn't that they lied. It was how easily they did it. How naturally. Like I was an inconvenience they'd airbrushed out of the family portrait. And for a long time I let them. Because I thought being the bigger person meant being quiet. Because I thought the uniform was enough. That the medals, the service, the clearance levels, the presidents briefed, all of that would one day speak louder than their silence. But legacies don't write themselves. And truth can't be honored if it's hidden. That night when the helicopter came, and Colonel Navarro saluted me, before a room of people who once laughed at the sound of my name, it wasn't vindication I felt. It was clarity. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at a version of me that never existed. And the moment they saw who I truly was, the rank, the role, the responsibility, they stopped laughing. Because you can't mock what outranks your imagination. But even then, it wasn't about revenge. It was about record. And when I stood under the flag receiving the Medal of Honor, I didn't think about what my parents didn't say. I thought about the cadet who waited for me afterward. Barely 20, Freckles' voice shaking as she whispered, "Ma'am, you're the reason I enlisted." That's what legacy really is. It's not applause. It's not family pride. It's not revenge. It's the moment someone finds themselves reflected in your story and realizes they matter too. My family may never rewrite their version, but I don't need their version anymore, because I have my own. Unedited, unapologetic, unforgettable. If you've ever been excluded, dismissed, rewritten out of your own life, don't wait for the world to invite you in. Write yourself back in, speak your name clearly, and let that be louder than everything they tried to silence.